My name is Alexis Reed. I am 29 years old, and I live at the Willow Crest Estate. The sun was beating down on the Willow Crest Estate, but the real heat was coming from my own family. I stood near the back of the garden, trying to remain invisible. It didn't work. My Aunt Linda spotted me instantly. She nudged my cousin, and they both turned to stare. Then came the laughter. It was sharp and cruel, the kind of sound that used to make me run to my room and cry when I was a teenager. "Well, look at this," Linda said, her voice carrying clearly over the crowd of wealthy bidders. I didn't know they let paycheck-to-paycheck people into high-profile auctions like this. People nearby turned to look at me. My face burned, but I kept my back straight. My cousin smirked and stepped closer. "This isn't a thrift store, Alexis. You can't afford a single brick of this place. Go home." They thought they knew me. They thought I was still the failure they kicked out years ago. They were busy celebrating a victory they hadn't won yet. They didn't notice the auction paddle tight in my hand. They were laughing at the girl I used to be, completely unaware that the woman standing in front of them was the only person here who could actually write the check. Let them laugh. I was about to silence them forever. But before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe, drop a comment. Where are you watching from? My name is Alexis Reed. I am 29 years old. If you ask my family about me, they will tell you I am a ghost. Or worse, a mistake. For a long time I believed them. It wasn't always like this. When I was very young, I remember my mother's laugh. It was warm and filled up the whole room. She was the buffer between me and the rest of the Reed family. The Reeds were proud. They were obsessed with status, with money, with how things looked to the neighbors. My mother wasn't like that. She didn't care about fancy cars or country clubs. She cared about people. She cared about me. But then, when I was 12 years old, the silence came. My mother passed away from a sudden illness. I remember the funeral clearly. It was raining, a cliché I know, but it really was pouring rain. I stood by the grave, feeling like a piece of me was being buried along with her. I looked at my Aunt Linda and my Uncle Robert. They didn't look sad. They looked annoyed that the rain was ruining their expensive shoes. That was the day my life changed. It didn't happen all at once. It was slow, like a leak in a boat that you don't notice until you are already drowning. Aunt Linda moved into our house to help. That's what she told the neighbors. "Poor Alexis needs a mother figure," she said with a sad smile. But the moment the front door closed, the smile vanished. First, it was the small things. She moved my things around. Then, she moved me. "You don't need the master bedroom view," she said. "Your cousin Sarah needs more space for her piano." So, I was moved to the small room at the back of the house, the one that used to be a storage closet. It was cold in the winter and hot in the summer. But I didn't complain. I didn't want to cause trouble. Then the insults started. At dinner, if I tried to speak, Aunt Linda would sigh loudly. "Alexis, please. Nobody wants to hear your daydreams." My cousin Sarah, who was the same age as me, learned quickly. She learned that treating me like a servant made her look powerful in front of her mother. "Alexis, iron my dress," Sarah would say before a school dance. "And make sure you don't burn it like you did with the toast." I wasn't invited to the dances. I wasn't invited to family vacations. I was the one who stayed behind to water the plants and dust the furniture. I became invisible. I was the girl in the background, the one wearing old clothes while they wore silk and cashmere. By the time I was 18, I had a dream. I wanted to go to college. I wanted to study business. I had good grades, better grades than Sarah, actually. I had applied to a good university and got in. I was so excited. I brought the acceptance letter to the dinner table. My hands were shaking. "Look," I said, placing the letter on the table. "I got in. I'm going to study finance." Uncle Robert laughed. It was a dry, cracking sound. He didn't even pick up the letter. He just pushed it aside with his fork. "And who is paying for this?" he asked. I was hoping there was some money left from Mom's insurance," I stammered. "She told me once there was a fund." Aunt Linda slammed her hand on the table. "That money is gone, Alexis. It went to paying for your food, your clothes, the roof over your head for the last 6 years. Do you think you live here for free, you ungrateful child?" "But, no buts," Linda snapped. "You aren't going to college. You aren't smart enough for business anyway. You're just like your father, weak. You'll get a job at the local diner, and you'll contribute to this household." That night, I cried until my eyes were swollen shut. But something else happened that night, too. A fire lit up inside me. It wasn't a hot, explosive fire. It was a cold, blue flame. It was the fire of survival. I realized they would never love me. They would never support me. If I stayed, I would be their servant forever. 2 days later, I turned 19. I packed 2 suitcases, that was it. I had 3 pairs of jeans, some t-shirts, a warm coat, and a photo of my mother. I waited until they were watching television in the living room. I walked down the stairs. The floorboards creaked. They turned to look at me. "Where are you going?" Sarah asked, seeing the bags. She looked amused. "I'm leaving," I said. My voice was steady. I was surprised by how calm I sounded. Aunt Linda laughed. "Leaving? Where will you go? You have no money, you have no friends. You'll be back in a week, crawling on your knees, begging for a warm meal." "I won't be back," I said. "Go then," Uncle Robert shouted. "See how hard the real world is. Don't come crying to us when you fail." I walked out the door and didn't look back. The next 10 years were hard, harder than I can explain. I worked 2 jobs. I waitressed in the morning and cleaned offices at night. I slept in a small apartment that smelled like mold. I ate instant noodles every day. But every night I studied. I went to the library and read everything I could about real estate, about markets, about data. I realized that real estate wasn't just about buying houses. It was about patterns. It was about numbers. I started building a computer program on a cheap laptop I bought from a pawn shop. It was an algorithm to predict which neighborhoods would go up in value before anyone else noticed. It took me 5 years to perfect it. I pitched it to investors. Most of them laughed at me. I was a young woman in a cheap suit, but one investor listened. He gave me a chance. That was the turning point. My company, Reed Analytics, took off. We weren't just successful. We were unstoppable. I made my first million by 26, my first 10 million by 28. But I stayed quiet. I didn't buy a Ferrari. I didn't post on social media. I kept my life private. My family had no idea. To them, I was still the failure who ran away. While I was building my empire in the shadows, my family was trying to maintain their illusion of wealth. I kept tabs on them. I admit it. I hired a private investigator to send me monthly reports. It wasn't because I missed them. I just needed to know. I learned that Uncle Robert made some bad investments. They were bleeding money. But they refused to downgrade their lifestyle. They still threw parties. They still leased expensive cars. They were living on credit, pretending to be royalty. And then there was Willow Crest Estate. Willow Crest was the crown jewel of our town. It was a massive, historic mansion on 50 acres of land. It had a private lake, a ballroom, and gardens that looked like they belonged in a movie. For as long as I could remember, the Reeds talked about Willow Crest. "That house belongs to us," Aunt Linda used to say when she drove past it. "One day, when the market turns, we will buy it. It will be the symbol that the Reeds have risen to the top." It was their obsession. It was their validation. If they owned Willow Crest, nobody could question their status. 2 months ago, the owner of Willow Crest died, and the estate went up for auction. The news traveled fast. My investigator told me that Aunt Linda was ecstatic. She was telling everyone in town that they were going to buy it. "The Reeds are finally rising," she told the local newspaper. "We are bringing the estate back to its glory." I sat in my office in the city, reading the report. My office was glass and steel, overlooking the skyline. I wore a tailored suit that cost more than Aunt Linda's car. I looked at the photos of the estate. It was beautiful, but it needed work. It needed vision. My family didn't have vision. They only had vanity. I picked up the phone and called Mark, my financial advisor. "Mark," I said, "the Willow Crest auction, get me the details." "You're interested?" Mark asked. "It's a distressed property, Alexis. It's going to go for a high price just because of the land value." "I know," I said. "I want to bid, but I want to do it anonymously until the day of the auction." "Okay," Mark said. "I'll set up the shell company credentials for the preliminary paperwork, but you have to be there in person for the final signature if you want the title transfer done immediately." "I'll be there," I said. I hung up the phone and stared out the window. I wasn't doing this just to hurt them. I was a businesswoman. The estate was a perfect location for my new project, a headquarters for a mentorship program for women in business. It was poetic, the place my family wanted for vanity I would use for empowerment. But I won't lie, the thought of seeing their faces when I walked in, that was a bonus. The day of the auction approached. I prepared carefully. I didn't want to look flashy, I wanted to look simple. I chose a sleek black dress, no jewelry except for a small watch. I tied my hair back. My family was bragging all over town. They had liquidated their remaining assets. They had taken out loans. They had scraped together every penny they could find. They were going all in. They believed the house would sell for around $8 million. They had managed to secure a limit of $10 million. They thought they were safe. They didn't know that my limit was $20 million, and I didn't need a loan. The morning of the auction was bright and cold. I drove myself. I didn't take my driver. I drove a rented sedan, nothing fancy. I wanted them to underestimate me until the very last second. I parked at the edge of the long driveway. The lawn was filled with white chairs. Waiters were passing around champagne. The air smelled of expensive perfume and old money. I walked toward the registration table. I saw them immediately. They were standing near the front, right by the auctioneer's podium. Aunt Linda was wearing a bright red dress and a hat with a massive feather. She looked like she was already the owner. Uncle Robert was smoking a cigar, puffing smoke into the air like a chimney. Cousin Sarah was laughing loudly, holding a glass of champagne. They looked confident. They looked arrogant. I took a deep breath and walked into the crowd. I tried to blend in, but the crowd wasn't that big. Maybe 50 people. Aunt Linda turned her head. Her eyes scanned the crowd, probably looking for rivals. Then her gaze landed on me. She froze, the smile dropped off her face. She grabbed Sarah's arm and pointed. They walked over to me. They didn't walk, they marched. "What are you doing here?" Aunt Linda hissed. She didn't shout, but her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "Hello, Aunt Linda," I said calmly. "I'm here for the auction." Sarah burst out laughing. "You, for the auction? Alexis, look around you. This isn't a garage sale. Do you even know what the starting bid is?" "I have a general idea," I said. "It's $5 million, Uncle Robert said, stepping forward. He looked me up and down with disgust. $5 million? Do you even have $5 in your pocket?" People around us started to listen. I saw a few heads turn. This was exactly what they wanted. Public humiliation. "I didn't know they let paycheck-to-paycheck people into these things," Linda said, raising her voice so the neighbors could hear. "This is embarrassing, Alexis. You are embarrassing us." "I'm just here to watch," I lied. "Is there a law against watching?" "There should be a law against loitering," Sarah sneered. "Why don't you go back to whatever hole you crawled out of? We are about to make history here. We don't need you ruining the photos." "Let her stay," Uncle Robert said, smirking. "Let her watch. It will be good for her to see what real success looks like. Maybe she'll learn something." "Fine," Linda said. She leaned in close to my face. I could smell the heavy scent of her hairspray. "But stay in the back, and don't you dare open your mouth. If you make a sound, I will have security throw you out." "I understand," I said softly. They turned their backs on me. They laughed as they walked away, clinking their glasses. They felt powerful. They felt like they had already won. I walked to the back row of chairs and sat down. I placed my purse on my lap. Inside my purse was my bidder registration card. I hadn't shown it to them. I held it tight. The auctioneer stepped up to the podium. He was a tall man with a booming voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Willow Crest. Today we are selling not just a home but a legacy." The bidding began. It started slow. 6 million, 6.5. My family stayed quiet waiting. They wanted to make a dramatic entrance. At 7 million, Uncle Robert raised his paddle. 7 million, he shouted. The crowd murmured. The reeds were playing. 7.5, a man in a gray suit countered. 8 million, Aunt Linda shouted next. She looked around the room, daring anyone to challenge her. I sat perfectly still. I watched them. They were sweating. I could see the tension in their shoulders. They were reaching their limit, but the adrenaline was pushing them forward. 8.5, the man in the gray suit said. 9 million, Uncle Robert yelled. His face was red. The man in the gray suit shook his head and lowered his paddle. He was out. 9 million going once. The auctioneer called out. My family was beaming. They were high-fiving each other. They thought it was over. 9.5, a new voice said. It was a woman in the front row, a developer from out of town. My aunt's face went pale. They hadn't expected this. They huddled together. I saw them arguing. Uncle Robert was shaking his head, but Linda was pushing him. 10 million, Linda screamed, her voice cracked. $10 million. This was it. This was their absolute ceiling. I knew their finances better than they did. If they spent a penny over 10 million, they would be bankrupt within a year. But they were desperate. The developer from out of town looked at her notes. She hesitated, then she shook her head. Too rich for me, she muttered. We have 10 million to the reeds, the auctioneer said. 10 million going once. My heart was beating steady and slow. Bam, 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 going twice. My family was already celebrating. Sarah was taking a selfie. Linda was crying tears of joy. "This is it," I heard Linda say to Robert. "We're getting it, finally, and look at Alexis back there. She won't dare open her mouth. She won't dare open her mouth." Those words floated back to me. They hung in the air. I looked at them. They looked so small from where I was sitting. They were small people with small hearts. They had spent my entire life trying to make me feel small so they could feel big. I looked down at my phone. A text message had just come through from Mark. "Funds cleared. You are green to go up to 25 million if needed." "Good luck, boss." I put the phone away. 10 million going. The auctioneer raised his gavel. I stood up. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. I just lifted my paddle, number 402, high into the air. 11 million, I said. My voice was clear. It cut through the garden like a knife. The silence that followed was instant. It was heavy. The auctioneer froze. "I have 11 million from the lady in the back. 11 million. For a second, nobody moved. Then, slowly, my family turned around. The look on their faces is something I will never forget as long as I live. It wasn't just shock. It was horror. It was as if they were seeing a ghost. Aunt Linda's mouth hung open. Her eyes were wide, bulging out of her head. Uncle Robert dropped his cigar. It fell onto the grass, smoldering near his expensive shoe. Sarah lowered her phone, her hand trembling. "What?" Linda whispered. "No, she can't." $11 million, the auctioneer repeated, looking at me. "Do I hear 12? All eyes were on me now. The whispers started. "Who is she? Is that the niece? Does she have that kind of money?" I stood there, calm. I looked directly at Aunt Linda. I didn't smile. I just looked at her with a steady, blank gaze. "You!" Linda shrieked. She stepped toward me, forgetting where she was. "You stupid girl, put that paddle down. You are going to get us sued. You don't have that money." 11 million, I said again to the auctioneer, ignoring her completely. "Do I have the bid?" "You have the bid, madam," the auctioneer said. He looked at Uncle Robert. "Sir, do you wish to counter? The bid is 11 million. Uncle Robert looked like he was having a heart attack. He looked at Linda. They both knew the truth. They didn't have 11 million. They didn't have 10.5. They were tapped out. They were done. Robert stammered. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Alexis, stop this. This isn't a game." "I know," I said. "I'm not playing." "Going once at 11 million, the auctioneer chanted. "Stop her," Sarah yelled. "She's lying. She's broke. She's a waitress." "Security," the auctioneer said calmly. "Please ask the other bidders to remain quiet." A security guard stepped in front of Sarah. She looked like she wanted to scratch my eyes out. "Going twice." I saw the hope drain out of Aunt Linda's eyes. She realized in that second that she had lost, but she didn't understand how. She couldn't process that the girl she locked in the storage room was currently buying her dream house. "Sold," the gavel slammed down. It was the loudest sound I had ever heard. "Sold to Miss Alexis Reed for $11 million. The crowd applauded politely. My family didn't move. They stood there, frozen statues of defeat. I lowered my paddle. I took a deep breath. The air tasted sweet. I walked past them toward the podium to sign the papers. As I passed Aunt Linda, she grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight, desperate. "How?" she hissed. "How did you do this? Did you steal it? Did you marry some old man?" I stopped. I looked at her hand on my arm, then up at her eyes. "Let go of me," I said quietly. She let go as if my skin burned her. "I didn't steal it, Linda," I said. "And I didn't marry it. I earned it. While you were busy talking about being rich, I was busy becoming rich." You monster," she whispered. "You stole our dream." "It was never your dream," I said. "It was just a house. And now it's my house." I turned away and walked to the table where the lawyers were waiting. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. I signed my name, Alexis Reed. The house was mine, but the look on their faces, that was free. The sound of the gavel slamming down was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It wasn't just a wooden hammer hitting a block. It was the sound of a heavy door slamming shut on my past. "Sold," the auctioneer, Mr. Henderson, boomed, his voice echoing off the stone walls of the estate. "To Miss Alexis Reed for $11 million. For a moment, nobody moved. The courtyard was completely silent. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the space. I sat there in my folding chair, my hand still gripping the paddle, number 402. My heart was hammering against my ribs, hard and fast, but my face remained still. I had practiced this face in the mirror for years. It was the face of someone who couldn't be hurt. Then the noise started. It began as a low ripple of whispers, spreading through the crowd like a wave. Heads turned. People stood up on their toes to get a better look at me. I saw the man in the gray suit, the one who had dropped out at 9 million, shake his head in disbelief. But I wasn't looking at them. I was looking at my family. They were frozen in a tableau of absolute horror. Aunt Linda's mouth was hanging open, her jaw practically unhinged. The color had drained from her face, leaving her looking gray and old beneath her heavy makeup. Uncle Robert was staring at the auctioneer, as if the man had just spoken in a foreign language. And Sarah was looking at me. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of confusion and sudden, sharp fear. She looked like a child who had just realized the monster under the bed was real. I stood up. My legs felt steady. I smoothed down the front of my black dress. I picked up my purse. "Congratulations," a woman next to me whispered. She looked at me with awe. That was quite a move. "Thank you," I said quietly. I began the walk toward the podium. I had to walk past my family to get there. The path was narrow, lined with chairs. As I approached them, the crowd seemed to part, giving me space. Aunt Linda seemed to wake up from her trance as I got closer. She took a stumbling step toward me. She reached out a hand, her fingers trembling. "Alexis," she whispered. Her voice was thin, barely audible. What did you just do?" I didn't stop walking. I didn't slow down. I looked her right in the eyes, my gaze cool and level. "I bought a house, Linda," I said. "Excuse me, I have paperwork to sign." I brushed past her. I felt the heat of her body as I passed, the smell of her expensive, cloying perfume that used to make me nauseous when I was a child. Today it just smelled like desperation. I reached the auctioneer's table. Mr. Henderson was beaming at me. He looked relieved. He had probably worried the bidding would stall at 8 million. "Miss Reed," he said, extending a hand. "A pleasure, truly, that was a magnificent bid." "Thank you, Mr. Henderson," I said. I shook his hand. His grip was firm. "I assume you have the transfer documents ready." "We do," he said. He gestured to a lawyer standing beside him. The lawyer slid a thick stack of papers across the table. "We received the verification of funds from your bank 10 minutes ago. Everything is in order. We just need your wet signature." I picked up the pen. It was heavy, a solid brass instrument. I looked down at the paper. "Deed of sale, Willow Crest Estate." My hand hovered over the signature line. For a split second, I thought about the girl I used to be. The girl who scrubbed the floors in Aunt Linda's house. The girl who ate dinner alone in the kitchen while the family laughed in the dining room. The girl who was told she was worthless, stupid, and destined for failure. I pressed the pen to the paper. The ink flowed smooth and black. "Alexis Reed." I signed it again, and again. Each signature felt like I was carving my name into history. "Congratulations," the lawyer said, handing me a set of keys. They were heavy iron keys on a simple ring. "The estate is yours, effective immediately." I took the keys. I closed my hand around them. The metal was cold and hard. It was real. I turned around. The crowd was beginning to disperse, heading toward the parking lot, but my family hadn't moved. They were standing in a tight cluster near the exit, blocking my path. They were waiting for me. I took a deep breath. This was the part I had prepared for. The confrontation. I walked toward them. I didn't rush. I walked with the slow, measured pace of a woman who owns the ground she is walking on. As I got closer, I saw the shock on their faces shifting into something else. Anger, denial, entitlement. Linda stepped forward, blocking my way. Her face was splotchy with red patches. "You," she hissed. "You little fraud." "Move, Linda," I said. "I will not move," she shrieked. Her voice cracked, loud enough that several people stopped to watch. "You explain yourself right now. What is this game? Who is paying for this? Did you steal it? Did you find some sugar daddy to fund this little stunt to embarrass us?" "Keep your voice down," Uncle Robert hissed at her, grabbing her elbow. He looked terrified. He looked at me with pleading eyes. "Alexis, please. People are watching." "Let them watch," I said calmly. "I have nothing to hide." "You have $11 million to hide," Linda yelled, pulling away from Robert. She pointed a finger in my face. "You expect us to believe that you came up with that kind of money. You were a waitress, Alexis. You didn't even finish college." "I did finish college," I said. "I finished top of my class. I did it at night, while I was working 2 jobs, you just never asked." Sarah stepped forward. She crossed her arms, trying to look tough, but her lip was quivering. "So what? You won the lottery, is that it?" "No lottery," I said. "Work, years of it. While you were going to parties, Sarah, I was building a company. While you were buying purses, I was writing code. While you were sleeping in until noon, I was analyzing market trends." "Liar," Sarah spat. "My company is called Reed Analytics," I said. You can look it up. We consult for some of the biggest real estate firms in the country. I built it from nothing. From the 2 suitcases I left your house with. The reality of my words hit them. I saw it sink in. Uncle Robert's shoulders slumped. He knew enough about business to know that analytics was lucrative. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in years. Read analytics, he whispered. I read about that firm in the journal last month. That's you. That's me, I said, but why didn't you tell us? Robert stammered. We're family, Alexis, if you were doing well. Why keep it a secret? I laughed. It was a short, dry sound. Tell you? Why? So you could ask for money, so you could take credit for my success, or so you could tell me I was doing it wrong, just like you told me everything I did was wrong when I lived with you. We took you in, Linda shouted. She was shaking now. We gave you a home when your mother died. We fed you, we clothed you. You didn't give me a home, I said. My voice dropped lower, becoming steel-hard. You gave me a roof. There is a big difference. You made me a servant in my own house. You moved me into the storage closet so Sarah could have a piano room she never used. You made me cook your meals and clean your toilets. That was chores, Linda cried. It was discipline. It was abuse, I said simply. And the money, the insurance money my mother left, you told me it was gone. You told me it was used up. But I know the truth, Linda. I hired a forensic accountant 3 years ago. I know you drained that trust fund to pay off your credit cards and buy that BMW you crashed. Linda's face went dead white. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. You stole from an orphan, I said. You stole from your own sister's daughter, and then you kicked her out on the street. Alexis, wait, Robert said. He stepped in front of Linda as if to protect her. That was a complicated time. We were under a lot of stress. We didn't mean to hurt you. You laughed at me, I said. 20 minutes ago, right here, you laughed at me. You said I didn't know they let paycheck-to-paycheck people in here. Remember? Robert looked down at his shoes. I remember, I said. I remember every word. I remember every time you called me stupid, every time you called me weak, every time you told me I would come crawling back. I took a step closer to them. They huddled together, looking small and pathetic. Well, I came back, I said, but I'm not crawling, I'm buying. You can't do this, Sarah cried out. Tears were streaming down her face now. This house, it was supposed to be ours, we told everyone. It's our dream. It's a building, Sarah, I said. It's brick and mortar. Dreams are things you build yourself. You don't buy someone else's legacy and call it yours. Please, Linda whispered. Her anger was gone, replaced by pure terror. Alexis, please, we put everything into this auction. We liquidated the assets. If we don't get this house, we have nowhere to go. We sold our house on Maple Street. The closing is next week. I looked at them. I really looked at them. They were standing on the precipice of ruin. They had gambled everything on this moment, on their arrogance, and they had lost. You sold your house? I asked. Yes, Robert said, his voice trembling. We were so sure. We thought with the estate we could refinance, get a business loan against the equity, start over. So you're homeless, I stated. Essentially, Robert said. Alexis, you have so much room here. This place is huge. The guest wing alone. It's bigger than our old house. Maybe we could work something out. We could help you manage the property. We could be a family again. The audacity was breathtaking. Even now, after everything, they still thought they could use me. They thought they could just slide back into my life because they needed something. I looked at the keys in my hand, then I looked back at them. No, I said. What? Linda gasped. No, I repeated. You cannot live here. You cannot manage the property. You cannot be near me. But we're family, Sarah wailed. I know, I said, and that is why it hurts. But I am not doing this to punish you. I am doing this to protect myself. I spent 10 years healing from what you did to me. I won't let you break me again. We won't, Robert promised. We've changed. You haven't changed, I said. You're just broke. There is a difference. I checked my watch. I have meetings with my contractors in an hour. You need to leave. This is private property now. You're heartless, Linda spat, her eyes narrowing. You're a cold, heartless bitch. Your mother would be ashamed of you. That was the final arrow. She tried to hit me in the only soft spot I had left, but the arrow didn't pierce. It bounced off. My mother, I said softly, wanted me to be happy. She wanted me to be safe. She would be proud that I finally stood up to the people who hurt me. I turned my back on them. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, and also the easiest. Get off my driveway, I said over my shoulder. I walked toward my car. Behind me I heard Sarah sobbing. I heard Linda cursing. I heard Robert trying to hush them. I got into my rented sedan. I closed the door. The silence inside the car was beautiful. I put the key in the ignition and started the engine. I didn't look in the rearview mirror as I drove past them. I kept my eyes on the road ahead. I drove out of the gates of Willow Crest, the heavy iron keys sitting on the passenger seat beside me. I was shaking just a little, but it wasn't fear. It was the release of adrenaline. It was the physical sensation of a 10-ton weight being lifted off my shoulders. I had done it. I had faced the monsters, and they were just people. Small, sad, angry people. I drove toward the hotel where I was staying. I needed to pack. I had a move to plan. The first night I spent at Willow Crest was surreal. I didn't have a moving truck yet. I didn't have furniture. I had a sleeping bag, a cooler with some sandwiches, my laptop, and a camping lantern. I unlocked the massive front doors. The foyer was enormous, with a double staircase that curved up to the second floor. A crystal chandelier hung from the ceiling, dusty but still grand. The air inside smelled of old wood and lemon polish, with a hint of disuse. I locked the door behind me. The click of the deadbolt echoed through the empty house. I walked through the rooms. The dining room with its long table covered in a white sheet. The library with shelves that reached the ceiling, empty of books. The ballroom, vast and echoing. I went up to the master bedroom. It was the room my Aunt Linda had talked about for years. The view from the master suite is to die for, she used to say. I walked to the window. It was true. The view was incredible. The moonlight reflected off the private lake, turning the water into silver. The trees of the forest stood like silent sentinels around the property. I spread my sleeping bag on the floor in the center of the room. I sat down, cross-legged, and ate a sandwich. It was the best meal I had ever tasted. I wasn't lonely. For the first time in my life, the silence wasn't oppressive. It was full of potential. It was a blank canvas. The next morning, the work began. I didn't buy Willow Crest to live in it like a princess. I bought it to work. I had a vision for this place. I wanted it to be the headquarters for Reed Analytics, but more than that, I wanted it to be a sanctuary. I called a meeting with my senior staff. They drove out from the city, parking their modest cars in the grand driveway. We set up a temporary office in the dining room, using folding tables. "This is it?" my operations manager Dave asked, looking around at the peeling wallpaper in the hallway. "It's big. It's perfect," I said, "but it needs work, a lot of work." I hired contractors, but I made a specific choice. I didn't hire the big, corporate construction firms that my Uncle Robert would have used. I looked for local businesses. I looked for female-owned businesses. I hired a woman named Maria to lead the renovation. She ran a small construction company and had been struggling to get big contracts because she was a woman in a man's world. When I handed her the contract for the entire estate renovation, she cried. "You don't know what this means," she told me, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "This saves my business." "I know," I said, "just do a good job." "I'll give you the best work of my life," she promised, and she did. For the next 6 months, Willow Crest was a hive of activity. The sound of hammers and saws replaced the silence. Dust was everywhere. I lived in the midst of it, moving from room to room as they were finished. We turned the ballroom into the main workspace. We took down the heavy velvet curtains and let the light flood in. We installed polished concrete floors and modern desks. We kept the crystal chandelier, a reminder of the past hanging over the future. We turned the east wing into the Willow launchpad. This was my passion project. It was a residential incubator for female entrepreneurs. I wanted to create a space where women could come, live rent-free for 6 months, and build their businesses without the pressure of paying bills or dealing with unsupportive families. I knew what it was like to try to build a dream when you were hungry and tired. I wanted to take that burden away for others. As the house transformed, so did I. I stopped wearing the dark, invisible clothes I used to favor. I started wearing bright colors. I cut my hair into a sharp, modern bob. I walked with my head high. The town, of course, was buzzing. In a small town like ours, news travels faster than light. Everyone knew that the Reed girl had bought the mansion. I became a local celebrity, though I didn't seek it out. When I went to the grocery store, people stopped me. "Are you Alexis?" they would ask. "We heard about what you're doing at the estate. It's wonderful." I was polite, but I kept my distance. I knew how quickly public opinion could shift. These same people had ignored me when I was the poor cousin wearing hand-me-downs. But I couldn't ignore the news about my family. My private investigator, a man named Ken, sent me weekly updates. I told him I didn't want to stalk them, but I needed to know if they were a threat. I needed to know where they were. The report he gave me 2 months after the auction was grim. They had indeed lost their house on Maple Street. The bank had foreclosed on it before they could sell it for a profit, due to the liens they had taken out to bid on the estate. They walked away with almost nothing. They had moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a rundown complex on the south side of town. It was a rough neighborhood. Uncle Robert was working as a greeter at a car dealership. The man who used to smoke Cuban cigars and brag about his stock portfolio was now standing in a parking lot, waving at cars. Aunt Linda was working part-time at a department store, at the returns counter. I could only imagine the hell she was giving the customers, and the hell they were giving her. And Sarah was the most shocking. She had gotten a job as a waitress at the local diner, the same diner where I had worked when I was 19. Ken showed me a photo he had taken from across the street. It showed Sarah in a stained apron, wiping down a table, looking exhausted and miserable. I stared at the photo. 10 years ago, she had come into that diner with her friends while I was working. She had deliberately spilled a milkshake just to watch me clean it up. She had laughed and left a penny as a tip. Now, she was holding the rag. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't happiness. I thought it would be. I thought seeing them brought low would make me feel ecstatic, but it just felt sad. It was a waste. They were capable people who had destroyed themselves through vanity. "Do you want me to intervene?" Ken asked. "Offer them something anonymously?" "No," I said instantly. "Absolutely not." "Understood," Ken said. "They need to learn," I said. "They need to understand what life is really like. If I save them now, they will never learn. They will just resent me for the handout." I put the photos in a drawer and locked it. I had my own work to do. The Willow Launchpad opened in the fall. We selected 12 women for the first cohort. They came from all over the country. There was a coder from Detroit, a fashion designer from Atlanta, a biotech researcher from Boston. The day they arrived, I stood on the front steps of Willow Crest to welcome them. They looked at the house with wide eyes just like I had. They looked at me with intimidation. "Welcome," I said to them. "This is your home now. For the next 6 months, your only job is to dream and to build. We will handle the rest." One of the girls, a young woman named Maya, raised her hand. She was 19, the same age I was when I left home. She had a scrappy, nervous energy that reminded me of myself. "Miss Reed," she asked, "why are you doing this? You could have just turned this place into a resort or lived here by yourself. Why help us?" I looked at her. I looked at the group of women. "Because I know what it's like to have no one believe in you," I said. "I know what it's like to be told your dreams are stupid. And I promised myself that if I ever got the power, I would be the person I needed when I was your age." Maya smiled. It was a genuine, hopeful smile. That night we had a dinner in the great dining room. The table was full of food. The room was full of noise and laughter. We toasted to the future. I sat at the head of the table, looking down at the scene. This was what a family should look like. Not people bound by blood who hated each other, but people bound by purpose who supported each other. I raised my glass of wine. "To building," I said. "To building," they cheered. I took a sip. The wine was crisp and cold. As the dinner wound down, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text from an unknown number. "Alexis, it's your Aunt Linda, please. We need to talk. We are drowning here. Just 5 minutes, please." I stared at the screen. The text was desperate, humble. I debated deleting it. I debated blocking the number. But then I thought about the woman I was becoming. I wasn't the scared girl anymore. I wasn't the victim. I was the owner of the estate. I was the CEO. I could handle them. And maybe, just maybe, it was time for the final closure. I typed back. "Come to the estate tomorrow at 4 p.m. You have 10 minutes. Do not be late." I hit send. I looked back at the women laughing at the table. I wasn't afraid of tomorrow. I was ready. I walked to the front of the house. I was wearing jeans and a simple white shirt. I didn't need to dress up to impress them anymore. A taxi was pulling away as I approached. They stood in the driveway. Aunt Linda, Uncle Robert, and Sarah. They looked different. Aunt Linda wasn't wearing her usual designer clothes. She was wearing a simple dress that looked worn. Her hair wasn't perfectly styled. She looked older, tired. Uncle Robert looked defeated, his shoulders slumped. Sarah looked at the ground, refusing to meet my eyes. They looked like normal, struggling people. I stopped at the top of the stone stairs, looking down at them. I didn't invite them inside. "Hello," I said. Linda looked up. She tried to smile, but it was a broken, nervous thing. Alexis, she said, her voice wavered. It's good to see you, the place looks incredible, you've done so much work. What do you want? I asked. I wasn't being cruel, just direct. I didn't have time for small talk. Robert stepped forward, he held his hat in his hands. We came to apologize, Alexis, he said. We have been doing a lot of thinking. Since the auction. We were wrong, Linda added quickly. We treated you terribly, we know that now. We were blinded by our own ambition. We were jealous, maybe, we are so sorry. Sarah finally looked up. I'm sorry too, she mumbled. For everything. I looked at them. I searched their faces. Were they sincere? Maybe. Or maybe they were just desperate. They had lost everything, and now they were standing in front of the niece who had everything. I appreciate the apology, I said. It's long overdue. We are family, Linda said, gaining a little confidence. And families forgive, don't they? We were hoping. Well, we are in a bad spot, Alexis. We lost the house. We are living in a 2-bedroom apartment. It's very hard. I know, I said. I lived in a 1-room apartment for 5 years. I know how hard it is. Right, Linda said. So you understand, we were hoping. Maybe we could start over, maybe, since this house is so big, and you have so much room. She trailed off, but the request hung in the air. They wanted to move in. They wanted me to save them. They wanted to crawl back under the roof they had denied me, now that I was the one paying for it. I looked at the massive house behind me. I looked at the gardens. I thought about the young women working inside, building their futures. If I let them in, the toxicity would return. The judgment, the entitlement. They hadn't changed who they were, they had just changed their circumstances. No, I said, the word hung in the air, simple and heavy. No, Linda whispered. But, we're family. I accept your apology, I said. I really do, I don't carry hate for you anymore. Hate is too heavy and I have other things to carry. I forgive you for how you treated me. I walked down one step. But forgiveness does not mean access, I said firmly. You cannot live here, you cannot borrow money, you cannot be part of this life I built. I built this to get away from the dynamic you created. I won't invite it back in. So you're just going to let us suffer? Sarah cried out. You're rich, you could change our lives with a snap of your fingers. I changed my own life, I said. Now it's time for you to change yours. You are smart, capable people. You can work, you can rebuild, just like I did. I pulled a small envelope from my pocket. I had prepared it just in case. Here, I said, handing it to Robert. He opened it. Inside was a check for $10,000. This is for a fresh start, I said. It's enough for a deposit on an apartment and a few months of food. It's more than you gave me when I left. Take it, use it. But don't come back here asking for more. Robert stared at the check. His hands were shaking. He looked at me with a mixture of shame and gratitude. Thank you, he whispered. Goodbye, Uncle Robert, I said. I turned around and walked back up the stairs. Alexis, Linda called out. Please. I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I walked through the massive oak doors of Willowcrest and closed them behind me. The sound of the latch clicking shut was the best sound in the world. 2 weeks later, the sun was setting over the estate. The sky was a brilliant mix of purple and orange. I stood on the balcony of the master bedroom, holding a cup of tea. Below me in the garden, 3 of the mentees were sitting on the grass, laughing and looking at blueprints. They looked happy. They looked free. I took a sip of tea. The silence of the house wasn't lonely anymore. It was peaceful. I thought about my family. I heard they had moved into a small place in the city. Robert had gotten a job as a consultant. Sarah was working in retail. They were struggling, yes, but they were living. They were finally facing the real world. In a way, my refusal to save them was the best thing I could have done for them. I forced them to become real. I wasn't angry anymore. The knot in my chest that had been there for 10 years was gone. I realized then that my victory wasn't buying the house. It wasn't the $11 million. It wasn't seeing the look on Linda's face at the auction. My victory was this moment. Standing here in my own home, in my own skin, completely unafraid. I had outgrown the version of myself they tried to create. They wanted a victim. I became a victor. They wanted me to be small. I built something massive. I looked out at the horizon. The future was wide open. I had my company. I had my home. I had my mission to help other women. I was Alexis Reed. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly who that was. I'm telling you this story not to brag about a big house or a bank account. I'm telling you this because I know there are people out there right now who feel like I did. Maybe your family doesn't believe in you. Maybe your friends laugh at your dreams. Maybe you're the invisible one in your circle, the one they think will never amount to anything. I want you to know something. Their opinion of you is not your reality. If I had listened to my family, I would still be sleeping in a storage room. I would still be serving them, but I chose to listen to myself instead. You don't need to scream to prove them wrong. You don't need to fight them. You just need to build your skills, build your confidence. Build a life so solid that their doubts can't touch it. The best revenge isn't being cruel back to them. The best revenge is massive success. And the ultimate peace, that comes when you realize you don't even need their validation anymore. So, if you're hurting right now, use that hurt, turn it into fuel, pack your bags if you have to, start that business, write that book, do the work in the dark so you can shine in the light. My name is Alexis Reed. I was the girl they laughed at. Now I'm the woman they watch. Thank you for listening to my story.